All right, everybody, welcome back to the Curtain Call. My name is Shayne Kubas, contributor to Still Curtain and co-host of the Still Curtain podcast. And joining me as always is Tommy Jaggi, the usual host of the show, but the host of the Still Curtain podcast and the set expert for Still Curtain. Coming off a win, Tommy, always feels good, but right off the bat, let's just say we're not completely thrilled with this team quite yet, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're not there all yet, Shayne. It's definitely a step in the right direction, for sure. I mean, you got to see the win. And when the Steelers were up 23-7 against the Raiders, like I wanted them to just kind of cruise to victory. Put them away. And I think the game plan shifted a little bit late. Steelers had that 2-score lead. Obviously, we had some wacky penalties there that kind of kept the Raiders alive longer than they did. But I was really like, I was optimistic at one point, Shayne. I'm like, maybe Steelers can win this thing like 30-7 or 33-7. And that never seems to be the case with this team.
And that's the thing, right? Is like, I know it's a spoiled way to look at things. Okay. I'm 100% willing to acknowledge like a win is a win. You don't want to be complaining. Like, just look at the Vikings last year. I'm sure their fans were just happy winning games, even though they wasn't very convincing ever. But I just want to see one game. It's been so long, it feels like, since the Steelers just went into somewhere or even at home, just put a team to sleep immediately. Like, just took them out of the game. It was over halfway through. Like, we just haven't seen that. And it all comes back to this offense, right? Like, even though they had a better game in this game, it still just leaves a lot to be desired. And that's actually what our first topic is going to be about. Like, did the offense really improve, or is it just the Raiders, right? Because, like, the Raiders are bad. Like, just straight up bad football team, bad coach, bad everything. They have, like, a couple things going for them, and they're the only players that made impacts in this game. And it just wasn't quite enough, right? And that's just kind of the story for them. But did the offense really improve? And I feel like there's a couple things they did that if they continue to do, we will see more and more improvement. But I just don't trust that it's actually going to take hold. And it starts with the play action, right? Because we finally saw some play action plays, especially the touchdown to Pat was beautiful. The play action fake gets them to move up a little bit. The safety doesn't quite, play up enough and then gets beat on the corner route from Pat for the touchdown. Like, stuff like that is what we need to see from this team, because it's just hard to just drop back out of shotgun and throw the ball around when the passing concepts aren't good, when the receivers generally aren't the best at getting open yet. Like, you just can't win that way, right? And obviously part of that's the run game and offensive line play. All that factors in. But you can help it with play calling. And Canada hasn't done it in his career so far, the Steelers. But in this game, I will give him credit. There's at least a little bit of that stuff, right?
Yeah, I was more optimistic with Canada this game, obviously, than it was the first two games,
right?
Which were just another train wreck.
Yeah, the bar's not.
It's a very, very low bar to clear, Shayne.
Yeah,
I will give props where props are due. I mean, 8 play action passes, that's more than Steelers typically have in a game. Pickett was 6 of 8. I recall off the top of my head, 6 of 8 for 61 yards and a touchdown, a 135 passer rating, which is awesome. And you like to see it, because I went back and rewatched the game like I always do. And he really sucked the linebackers in with some of those play action calls. I think it caught Raiders off guard a little bit, which is excellent. I want to see that continue.
Yes.
At the same time, Shayne, it's like I also cut up every play where Miles Boykin's out there and Connor Hayward's out there. The Steelers are under center. You can bet your butt it's going to be a run. And that is where the Steelers need to kind of come in and say, I'm going to trick you here. Every once in a while when Boykin's out there, I'm going to throw a play action. I'm going to heave a ball down the field. Don't tip your hat so easily to it. And that's my biggest complaint with Canada in his calling for this last game. However, on the whole, I'm pretty pleased overall with the direction that this went. I like the play action that they incorporated there. In some of those, Kenny had the cleanest pocket that he had all night long, because it kind of kept the defense on its heels. They stuttered a little bit at the line of scrimmage. They didn't know they had to stay disciplined to the run at least. And credit Canada for sticking with the run, even though the offensive line didn't exactly do a bang-up job there.
We'll talk about that later too,
definitely got a little bit bulldozed there and bullied, kind of like they have been. Now, is it real, or is this a little bit fraudulent? I think it's a combination of both, Shayne. They played potentially the two toughest defenses in the NFL in back-to-back weeks. I mean, San Francisco is stacked. They were the number 1 DVOA defense last year. They're on track to being that same defense again in 2023. And then the Browns defense with Myles Garrett and with Jim Schwartz now there as their defensive coordinator. That defense is awesome so far. Like, through 3 games, it's untouchable. And they've allowed one touchdown drive in their first 3 games. And so I think that defense is for real finally. I know we don't like to give the Browns any credit. We keep thinking that oh, maybe at some point they'll get it, but they're not going to get there. Well, I think they got there defensively. Now it's up to their offense and Watson and that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, I think their defense is legitimately elite at this point. And they dominated Joe Burrow, and Burrow has struggled obviously early this year. So we'll see. I mean, we're 3 games into the season, but it looks like what we can say so far, Shayne, is the Steelers played 2 awesome defenses in back-to-back weeks. You go against the Raiders, who do not really have a stout defense at all. They do have Max Crosby, who gave them a few fits here and there.
Yeah, we'll talk about
and
that.
the Steelers' offensive tackles still suck, Shayne. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. They're among the bottom of the league, and in terms of like the pass protection grades, the Steelers are dead last in the NFL from PFF at 28.7 pass protection grade as a unit. 28.7. It's dead last by a mile, and it's disgusting. And you can't continue like this. And so there's tons of room for improvement there. At the same time, I was pleased overall with the offensive performance. It's not there yet. It is certainly not there yet. I think that Canada needs to do a better job utilizing his players for their skill sets. Like I've said the last couple of weeks, please get Calvin Austin a drag route. I want to see him get the ball in his hands with some space to work. Now, I love the deep ball to him, obviously. I think that was great. Get your skill players in the most advantageous situations for them and see what can happen.
Yeah, and I think the end-all be-all of the offensive performance is the fact that Kenny looked more in control. They did stuff to try to help him with that. There was a couple moving pockets, the play action we just talked about. There's things done that if you can continue to do those things and build upon them, there is an offense here, right? Like we know that there's capable players on this offense. The coaching has been the number one detractor. Now, you talked about the offensive line. And that's what I want to kind of pivot to while we talk about the offense, is while there was improvements in this game and while the play calling especially had its moments, there was still a lot of bad play calls, obviously. And more importantly, the offensive line is simply not good enough right now. If you're playing the Raiders and you have one guy who you're worried about, you can mostly get away with it, right? Because, again, Crosby still wrecked this game multiple times. There's still a lot of plays left out on the field, specifically because they refused or were not able to block Max Crosby. And we have to talk about Dan Moore because you talked about it a lot and we've talked about it a lot. The whole goal with him was you were hoping that he could develop into a starting caliber tackle and move eventually to the right side to allow Broderick Jones to come over. Now I don't know if we have a tackle on the roster right now, essentially. Like, we don't know what Jones is going to be, so he's still an unknown. And the 2 guys we do have, Okorafor is just not inspiring any confidence. He's better, but only because Dan Moore is the worst, right? Like, he's legitimately
the eye is being taken off of Okorafor's play because Moore has been so bad.
Right, and Okorafor is not playing well, obviously, like we just said, but it's at a point where like he's fine at best, right? Moore is a liability on almost every single passing play, especially. I mean, the run game he's never been great at, but like as a pass blocker, he cannot block anybody right now. And I already hear Steelers fans on Twitter being like, "Oh, what about Myles Garrett?" Don't talk to me about Myles Garrett right now, okay? I don't want to hear anything about him. Just go watch the Browns game this past week and tell me if you think Dan Moore stopped that guy or not. I don't want to hear it. But the point is at this point, Tommy, we wanted Jones to have the opportunity to sit and wait if he could, right? Because if Moore's good enough and you can let the raw rookie sit for a little while, that's generally a good idea, especially because offensive linemen take a while to develop nowadays because there's just so few of them that are really good. If you have the chance to learn, then it's great. But he cannot be worse. He literally cannot be, because Moore is the worst tackle in the sport right now. That's starting games, at least. Like, obviously, there's backups that are probably even worse. But, like, guys who have played enough snaps to be looked at and graded by whether – I don't care if you look at PFF or your eyes, whatever it is. It's all bad. He can't be worse than him. Jones has to play. He's just wrecking games by being out there. And, like, if he was a good run blocker at least – I can say, okay, well, he brings some sort of value and whatever else. He can't block anybody in the run game either. So why not let the rookie go out there? You drafted him in the top 15. You went up to get him. You play him now while you have the chance to build this offensive line some continuity. Because if you insert him halfway through the season, at that point, who knows if he's going to be able to get acclimated fast enough to really make much of a difference. At least now you have again, the Texans, I will say, don't want to preview them because we'll do that on our show tomorrow, but they're a much better team than I think all of us expected so far through 3 games, especially this past game when they just trounced the Jaguars. Their pass rush is still mediocre, obviously. Will Anderson Jr. had a good game, but he's their best that they got. even those guys are going to wreck Dan Moore. They are. Like, we know that. Like, you cannot continue to let this happen. So for me, they have to make that switch.
Mhm.
If they do that and they can do more of the stuff that they did well in this game, you could get an offense that can score that 20-ish points a game. And frankly, we're going to talk about the defense here more in a second. That's all you probably have to do, because this defense, even whenever they bend and you break a little bit and whatever else, like, they still make plays when they need them. And even in this game where they allowed a bunch of yards and whatever else, they made plays that ended up winning the game. So,
yeah, let's talk about Dan Moore for just a
yes.
second longer here, Shayne.
Yeah.
The sample's not good at all. Now,
No.
to give him props, sure, you win against Nick Bosa, you win against Myles
Right.
Garrett,
Right.
you win against Max Crosby. It doesn't get a lot harder than that. TJ Watt's
Yeah.
on your own team. You're not going against him, and you haven't gone against Micah Parsons. Otherwise, you'd
That's
have
you've faced you faced them
that's
all.
everybody. I mean, that those are the best in the business.
Yeah.
Having said that, he's performed exactly how you would expect a bad offensive tackle to perform against the best pass rushers in the league.
That's the issue.
So what I would stress again, and I said this on our last show, Shayne, I said, please do not use box score stats to determine how good or bad a player performed. You
especially in the
can't do
offensive
that.
line. You can't do that.
No, the eye test is so much more important than that. And listen, take it from somebody who's went back and watched each of the 3 games multiple times now.
Yes.
Moore has been atrocious. I mean, it's
bad.
It's been downright hard to watch at times because he's just getting bulldozed into Kenny Pickett, and he resulted in several more pressures this game. He can't hold up. You can't hold up. And now I know that you've got the hardest pass rushers out of the way so far. You will face Garrett again this year, but for the most part, you've got your hardest schedule out of the way. But at the same time, Shayne, that's kind of why I'm thinking there's no better time than now to start Project Jones, because we know at this point in year 3, Dan Moore's just not getting it. He's not the answer. I mean, use the eye test or use PFF, whatever you want to use. He's 68th graded out of 68 offensive tackles in a tier of his own at the bottom of the league. And his pass block grade it would be one of the worst in PFF history if it stood for the rest of the season the way it is right now. So take that for what it's worth, but also take what we're saying for the eye test. The eye test is just as bad as the grade. It really lines up with what the grade has shown. And the reason why
when you're that bad,
Pickett,
the grades usually
it's the reason why Pickett is bailing on the pocket. The reason why he's got to get rid of the ball quickly. It's because Dan Moore has been so bad. It's not just Dan Moore. I mean, Mason Cole's been terrible. Chooks has been terrible. Their guards have been below average, to say the least, in the first couple of games here. And you expect their guards to be better than that for the investments that they made. So it's a collection of things. It's not just one guy. But you've got the 14th overall pick sitting on your bench with the hardest stretch of games already out of the way. In my opinion, Shayne, there's no better time than now to turn to that guy. Like you said, get that continuity going on the offensive line. He's got an easier schedule coming up here. Let him get kind of acclimated now that those really hard pass rushers are out of the way for a few games here. Let him get acclimated here and see how he does, because I'm telling you right now, it's not going to be worse than what we saw from Dan Moore. Even if he gives up a sack or 2 sacks in these next couple of games, the overall sample, he's going to create a better pocket, I'm confident, than what Moore has been able to give the Steelers. They just need change on this offensive line. And I'm going to go, and I'll say what I always say: you get what you pay for. When you spend a mid-4th rounder on the offensive line and you go against elite NFL players that are some of the highest paid at their positions, you're getting exactly what you paid for in Dan Moore. And you can't expect more from him because this is the guy that you drafted. I mean, as a swing tackle, he's fine in that role. Personally, I think that Moore and Chooks should both be swing tackles in the NFL. I don't think they're starting caliber players.
Ideally. It's just, again, like, and you brought it up. I understand he's faced a gauntlet, right? And I do factor that into this situation. However, if you're a starting caliber tackle, you cannot allow this much pressure regardless of who you're facing. It's just insurmountable, right? You can't play like this and expect to keep your job. That's just what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Your job in the NFL as a tackle is to, regardless of the situation, at least give your quarterback a chance. And he just consistently has not done that. Like, they've had to scheme around the fact that their left tackle can't block anybody. It's just really hard to do that unless you're a team that's so good offensively, like the Dolphins or the Chiefs or whatever. You can get away with that sometimes. If you can be like, all right, I know there's pressure coming from this side, whatever, I'm going to factor that in and we'll deal with it. We don't have the ability to do that. Like, that's just not going to lead to offensive success. So Jones, again, I want to see him soon, and he's not the only rookie I want to see more of. We'll get to them later. But moving on here, so TJ Watt is on a defensive player of the year pace. Absolutely, right? 6 sacks through 3 games. Just again, dominant showing against the Raiders, forced a couple turnovers, in my opinion, just the way that he pressured Garoppolo on some throws that ended up getting picked. And it's just, again, we expected this, right? We talked about it, in the preseason when we're looking at our expectations for the year. For TJ at this point, the expectations are, if healthy, 20 sacks, I think at this point is fair to ask him to do, which is crazy to say, but I mean, he's done it once and I think he's going to do it again based on this sample size so far. And a defensive player of the year, top 3 finish. Like, that's the goal for him every year. And so far, certainly not disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's attainable, Shane. This is what I said. If Watt stays healthy, he is my bet to lead the league in sacks. In fact, I made a
very good bet.
I bet a DraftKings earlier in the year before the season started that Watt would lead the league in sacks, assuming that he stays healthy. I think it's a very logical bet because he just has an innate ability to get after the quarterback. It might not be as fast as what Myles Garrett does or Micah Parsons does. You're not going to get a ton of those wins that are the 2.5 second type plays, but he's relentless and he knows how to get after the quarterback. And I mean, he's already. I think that Illuminor this past week is a good football player. Like, I think
he's a pretty good tackle. He's been at least one
of the things that the Raiders had going for them is outside of like Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, like their next best thing that they're known for is their pass protection. Like they had a 100 pass protection grade going into week 3 because their team literally has not allowed a sack prior to that point. Colton Miller's a great left tackle.
Yes.
And I think Illuminor is unrated as a right tackle. And the Steelers kind of beat him up a little bit. And Garoppolo was able to get the ball out quick. If he wasn't able to do that, Shane, I think it would have been even worse for them. And so we know what we're getting with Watt. I mean, we've seen it. He's on a Hall of Fame pace. It's impossible to argue that he's not. And so assuming that Watt can stay healthy, because we know that in 2021 and 2022, when he was not full strength, he was not quite the same player. Even with leading the league in sacks in 2021, I don't think he played quite as strong as he did in 2019 and 2020. So if he can avoid that injury bug and truly stay healthy this season, I mean, I think it's certainly attainable. You have a really, really good football player. I think that he can go down as one of the best to wear the uniform for the Steelers. And so not surprised by what he's doing. I think it's going to be great for the defense overall once they start gelling here a little bit. I still have got my concerns in the secondary for sure.
We'll talk about that.
I've got my concerns in the interior defensive line without Hayward there. And I can't imagine like how they would look right now if you had a healthy Hayward to go with that, with what Highsmith and Watt are doing right now as well. So, I mean, you've got your bookend edge players. They are some of the best in the business right there. And it's showing. And so I think that we can expect more of the same from them. If you can bet on anybody to be that consistent staple of the Steelers for the rest of the season, it's Watt and Highsmith.
Yeah, those two are fantastic. And I will say shout out to Marcus Golden for getting his first sack as a Steeler.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice play. And also, of course, my boy with a beautiful swim move, Keanu Benson, getting a very quick sack of Garoppolo. And I think the third or fourth quarter, I forget. The pass rush, again, just excellent, right? And that's the lifeblood of this defense, right? It's the backbone of this team, their ability to get after the quarterback. And that's why it's so important for this offense to be able to get a lead, right? Because if they can get any substantial lead, especially in the second half, this pass rush can just go hunt, right? And we haven't even seen a ton from Herbig yet. And Golden obviously had a sack, but again, he hasn't really done a ton yet because he hasn't had to. But this pass rush is 4 deep. And then the interior, like you said, I do have some concerns overall still, but Benton at least flashed finally in this game as a pass rusher too, which was nice to see. So there's definitely things to look forward to from that perspective. And you hope that they can keep this up until Cam gets back and they can just add yet another all-pro level player to this group, right? That's kind of the goal here. You talked about the secondary. Yeah, the Steelers secondary was abused in this game, and is it time for a change? And I think that there's a couple changes they can make that I'm hoping that they will make. And I'll kind of just talk about them for a minute and pass it over to you, Tommy, see what you feel about it. Number one, Levi Wallace. I knew he had 2 picks. I don't care. The one pick was pressure, and he made an okay play. But it was on a tight end, which is maybe the only position he can run with at this point in his career. No offense to him. And the other pick, Garoppolo's throwing it up a prayer, and he just makes a play. Like he has good ball skills, he can make plays on the ball, but he just isn't around the ball ever anymore because he can't stay with guys.
Yeah.
Levi especially, he needs to sit on the bench more, and Joey Porter Jr. needs to start playing 70-80% of the snaps. Like, that's just what it comes down to. You drafted this guy with essentially a first-round pick. Thank you, Bears, by the way. Again, sorry to hear about Bears, though, by the way. Just awful day for them. But it just keeps getting worse now. But Joey Porter Jr., you draft him very high for a reason. Athletic press man corner. it's time to see him play. I mean, he played 38% of the defensive snaps, I think, in this game. Played very well overall in that game. You need to start seeing him play significantly more snaps on the outside. It's just time. I don't want to sit here and say like Levi shouldn't be on the team or anything like that, because that's kind of unfair, but it also is also kind of true, but that's beside the point. It's time for that change to happen, right? That's the main one. And then Desmond King, who did play in this game, believe it or not, just not on defense, only a special teams player. I think, unless there's something going on with him, like maybe he just needs time to acclimate to the scheme or whatever it is, we need to start seeing him play snaps, because whether it's in the slot or even outside, he's played outside enough, and he did it last year a lot for the Texans and managed it pretty well. They cannot be worse than what we've been getting from the outside play. And, that allows Patrick Peterson maybe to move into the slot more and all that stuff. Like, there's just those two, I think, in general, have to play a lot more moving forward if this secondary wants to get better.
Yeah, the Des King one is kind of surprising, because
Yes.
I would have thought he would have worked his way onto the defensive side of the football by
Yeah.
now. We'll see. I mean, I'm sure that's going to come in time here. But you talked about it with Levi Wallace. I mean, I talked to somebody already, Shayne, and I said this. It sounds terrible, but in some odd way, getting 2 picks in this game might have been bad for the Steelers defense if it makes it so it just takes that much longer for Porter to get on the field. Now, turnovers are great. When you get those takeaways, they're so important. You can't count on them from game to game, first of all. Secondly, it does not excuse 95% of the reps where Wallace just looks like trash. And again, he's good enough to be on an NFL roster. I believe that he should be a reserve player at this stage in his career. I think that his best football is already behind him when you come into the league running a 4.63, and you might be a 4.7 guy now. It very, very much shows on film. Very much. And it's all 3 of these games. I mean, we were talking about a player 3 games into the season, Shayne, who has given up over 200 yards in 2 scores. In efficiency-wise, is one of the least efficient starting cornerbacks in the entire NFL. And so the picks are awesome. I love it. I mean, if he gets 6 picks in the season, fantastic. You got to do something to kind of negate how bad you are everywhere else on the field. And that's what's concerning, is the fact that you can target Davante Adams 20 times in a game and have him catch 13 passes for 172 yards and a touchdown. It shows you that Levi wasn't doing his job for most of those snaps, and most of that was on him. And so I am not impressed at all with his play, not even a little bit. I think that Porter has been much better. The coverage has been much tighter in the limited sample that we have seen him for through these first 3 games. You drafted his replacement, essentially. I'd like to see that guy on the field more and Wallace on the field less. And like I said, nothing against, he's got the ball skills. He's shown that. He had 4 picks last year, which I think really, if we're being honest, Shayne, I think that saved his job last year as well, getting the takeaway. Steelers value that very much. And I understand why. But at the end of the day, if you're playing like crap on 90% of your snaps, it's not good for the team overall. And it was so easy for the Raiders to just dink and dunk the ball down the field. No, they didn't give up these monster plays, but my goodness, did those slants look so easy for Davante. Like, it was almost like nobody was covering him. I cut up one play, Shayne, where Wallace did not contact. He was up in press coverage, and he didn't get his hands on Davante until Davante had 15 yards after the catch. So that's how poor his makeup speed was. It's not good enough for today's NFL. You can't have a cornerback that slow and that unathletic out there trying to cover these good receivers.
Yeah, and I saw that clip that you posted. It almost looked like he was trying to do press bail, and like
yeah.
And it was weird. And like, why are you not like? It just nothing looked good from him.
But he's a step slow with his reaction time.
Exactly.
And once the guy gets the ball, I mean, he's striding away from him. Like
it's over.
He was only slowed down because of the rest of the traffic that Davante ran into. Like, otherwise he was off to the races. So,
and it's just so disheartening to watch the secondary right now, because like you said, Davante is an amazing player, right? But you know what he doesn't average a game? He does not average 13 catches. He doesn't average 172 yards. He doesn't average 2 touchdowns. He doesn't average 20 targets. This is an example of a team that understood, okay, our best guy is going to beat them every single play, basically. Like that's what they knew going into the game. And I think that that's telling of where the secondary is at. The fact that they knew, like, okay, we don't really have to worry about targeting anyone else. Like, we can just go to Davante 20 times and it's going to be really successful. It's really hard to play defense like that. Like, if the pass rush wasn't doing what it was doing, and this is really the case for the Steelers for several years now, but if the pass rush isn't playing the way that they're playing, they're not going to win many games, because the defense, frankly, is very susceptible to the pass whenever they don't get home. And until that changes, it's going to remain very streaky because, yeah, they got the turnovers, but a lot of that was because, well, one play, Jimmy Garoppolo just threw a punt up. I don't know what he was doing on the one to Patrick
Yep.
Peterson. But, and then even the last play of the game, it's just he's forcing it because the game's on the line. But if you're not getting turnovers, you're not getting pass rush. If we do play a team that can bottle us up with the pass rush, like just look at week 1. Like, yeah, TJ had 3 sacks, but they didn't really care because they were already winning by 20 points, and at that point, it doesn't matter. And that's the main issue with it is the secondary has to improve, and I think the only way it's going to is to start switching some of these guys out. I think Peterson in the slot, I want to see more because I feel like he might have a better chance of staying there and succeeding. And again, that means getting Wallace off the field and getting Joey on, and then probably Des King on the field as well. So,
and I have much higher hopes for Peterson than I do for Wallace. I know that Peterson's an old player in football terms by this stage in his career, but at least he was that all-pro player. I mean, at least he was that guy who even last year played at least very well in zone coverage in Minnesota, where Wallace has kind of gone downhill every year since his rookie year in Buffalo, and he's never been an exceptional player to begin with. And so I think that it is time to make that transition. You look at an example like Keanu Benton, like Benton was forced to play early because of Cam Hayward's absence, but he's playing well. And you can argue that he's maybe already the best interior defender. Who's to say that if you did the same for Porter, that Porter couldn't maybe be the most consistent cornerback on the team a couple weeks from now. And the same with Broderick Jones at tackle. And so you drafted these replacements. You kind of need to see them play because what teams are going to catch on really quickly, Shayne, they're going to realize that we're just going to do a 3-step drop. We're going to get the ball out because guys are going to be open against these old, slow cornerbacks who can't stay with our receivers. And we're going to completely negate what the Steelers do with Watt and Highsmith. They're going to be useless because we're going to get this ball out so fast. You need to get up on those receivers. You need to have guys that can have a little bit stickier coverage. And so I would like to see a change in the secondary for sure.
Yeah. And last thing I'll talk about before we get to our last part here. The other thing that's hurting is it's hurting Minka's ability as a playmaker because teams do not have to go up the seam, over the middle of the field, down the field. Like they don't have to do it because the corners are going to just leave guys open on the outside. So Minka doesn't have the ability to come crashing down some of these plays, right? Like it's really hurting his ability as that playmaking safety. And he made like 11 tackles in this game, made an impact for sure, but he's not getting a chance to make plays that can change games the way he did a lot last year. And that thing also needs to happen if they want to continue to get turnovers is allow Minka to play that role better. So a lot of things need to change there. But last part we want to talk about, and it's good and bad. So the Steelers finally committed to running the ball. Can they improve the efficiency? Because yes, they ran it like 30 plus times. I think it ended up being, I think it was a total of, actually I have the numbers here. I think it was 31 times total. But for about 105 yards, so 4-ish yards, not even 4 yards a carry.
3.4 carry,
yeah, 3.4 carry. Like the efficiency just isn't there. And you can sit there and say like, okay, well, we have one running back that's more of a plotter, power guy, and another one that's more explosive. They average about the same yards per carry. Like it's not even about the running backs at this point. You could put anybody back there. And the line is just not blocking well. I mean, the couple times they gave them room, Najee had a 17-yard run. He had a nice 9-yard run that made a guy miss in the hole. Jaylen Warren had an 11-yard run as well. Like there's been plays, but they're so sporadic because the only time that they happen is when they do actually have a hole open, right? Like imagine if we opened 3 or 4 more running lanes a game. We might average 4 or 5 yards a carry because that's all these guys seem to need, right?
Yeah, Shayne, I think that it's very, very easy to tell watching these first 3 games that the offensive line is a much bigger issue than the actual running backs right now. Like there's just not a lot of running room. And you go back and watch, and I think that these guys would be doing a respectable job if the offensive line could kind of hold up and create a little bit more up front. And so that just hasn't been there. Now, again, you played 2 really good defenses in back-to-back weeks to open the season. We're hoping that this can improve. We saw something similar last year, Shayne, where the Steelers really had trouble on the ground the first half of the season. Second half of the season, they were a top 12 running team. And so they did figure it out by then. We need to see that progression happen throughout the course of this season as well. So we know that Najee's not going to be the fastest guy when you get him out in space, but I can't knock Najee for what I've seen so far. I think that he's making the most of his opportunities. He had the nice spin on the run to create a little bit extra in this game. He had the nice 17-yard run. He bounced it to the left side there. And so he's doing what he can with these opportunities. Now you can say, sure, there's maybe 1 or 2 times where he did the jump cut in the backfield. It's like, go hit the hole hard, get your 3 or 4 yards and fall forward, get what you can get. He's trying to make something happen. He's waiting for that hole to open up, and it's just not happening, Shayne. And so the offensive line is far more to blame than the running backs at this point. And so I'd like to see that improve. Like if the offensive line can start bullying the people in front of them, you can bet that it's going to have a correlation on the running game, which goes back to the argument of you don't take a running back in the first round, especially if you don't have your offensive line set, because they can only do so much, right? You can only do what the line offers in front of you. And that's what we're seeing with the Steelers here. I think that these backs can at least be respected if the offensive line would do their part up front, and we just have not been getting that so far.
Yeah, and like you said, we've seen enough from these guys where when they do have open holes, like they're making plays. Like Najee looks much better than he did to start last year. Warren has still got the explosiveness, of course. Still made some impacts in the passing game so far through 3 weeks. But like again, until they open up lanes consistently, because like Najee does have the ability sometimes, or I shouldn't say the ability, but the tendency to try to make something happen when it clearly isn't there. But again, it's because I think he knows 3 out of 4 runs, there is nothing there. Like there's not going to be anything there. So he's trying to at least give the offense something to hang their hat on. And, maybe he can get the 3 yards. But he's like, what if I can get 7? What if I can make a play and get 7 or 8? Now we're in 2nd and 2. Like, and I understand that that's not helping the cause, but it's also not really his fault. And it's not Jaylen Warren's fault for averaging 3.6 yards per carry either in this game. Like they just don't have anywhere to go. And until they can find consistent running lanes, this offense isn't going to work consistently against good teams, because that is the key. If you can get into 2nd and 4 more often, or 3rd and 1, and do that more consistently, this offense has a chance to at least work just by default.
Yeah.
Whereas now when you're still getting the 3rd and longs, like Kenny made a couple plays on 3rd and long this game, the touchdown to Calvin on 3rd and 7, the throw to Pickens on the crossing route or the drag route on the 3rd down. Like he's made more in this game than he was before, but it's still just the difficulty level is just still too high most of the times, especially on 3rd down.
Yeah, it is. And Shayne, going back to, I mean, the running game wasn't efficient, but you can look at a couple of those drives too. They kind of knocked everything down a little bit, because right at the end of the game, it was very, very easy to tell. The Steelers are going to run the ball. We're going to milk the clock. And so they got stuffed for losses like 3 or 4 times right there alone. So that obviously doesn't help your running efficiency. And then, as I pointed out earlier in the show already, Shayne, they tip their hat when they're running the football. They tip their hat more than any team in the league. When you are under center, you run roughly 90% of the time. When Miles Boykin's in there, you're running 90+% of the time. And so those clues, if we know this from home, then a billion-dollar business like teams, NFL teams, they know it too. You can bet that they do. And so I think that there needs to be more disguise here. The Steelers are not that team that's going to say, I don't care if you know what we're doing. We're going to do it anyway, and we're going to bully you. They're not that talented enough to do that yet. Their offensive line's not there. They're not like the 49ers, where you can just say, I don't care if you know what we're doing. We're going to do it anyway.
Yeah,
and you can't stop us. You can't do a darn thing about it.
It doesn't matter.
Exactly. And so because they're not talented enough at this point to do that, you need to have a little bit more disguise in there. And like I said, I like the play action stuff. Keep it up, Canada, because that will help improve, and it will make Kenny's job a little bit easier. But at the same time, please do not tip your hat so easily to what you are doing. That will also it also brings down the efficiency of your running game. And so if you want the running game to just get better by default, even without the talent improving, just disguise it a little bit better. Don't show every single time that you are going to run the ball based on your personnel grouping, or if you're under center or whatever. It's just an easy tell to the defense.
Yeah, and I wanted to wait till this section to talk about it, because you did bring up the fact that he has a lot of tells, like who's on the field and whether they're under center, all this stuff. Like, and to me, it makes me wonder, like, does he know? Like, does Canada understand, like, other teams know what you're doing? Like, this isn't look at the numbers, because he obviously, someone in the building has to be like, well, I noticed based on our analytics here, like, when you're in this formation, you do this or that. Like, does he not realize it? Is no one telling him? Like, something's not right? Because an offensive coordinator, among like all coaches, should know, like, I don't want the defense to know what I'm doing. Ideally, like, that's not ideal, right? Like, it's just. And
it's not.
It brings me back to, like, I don't want to make it a personal story, but it's relevant for this. It cracks me up. I did play high school football in my hometown, and we had a coach whenever I was a sophomore starting out, and we ran basically the wing T offense, basically. So if anyone's not familiar, basically like an option run only offense, essentially, right? Like, there's a lot of moving parts to it, but it's essentially like a lot of toss sweeps and traps and power, like all that stuff. And the problem is that's the only thing we would run, right? So we ran legitimately like 50, 60 times a game and didn't throw the ball once, right? And at one point I said to myself, now again, I'm like 15, 16. I don't know as much about football as I do now, but I'm like, I know from the sideline without hearing the play call what direction the run's going to go and which player's getting the ball just based on who's in and how they're lining up. Do you think the other team knows? And I started to ask them, like, well, if the other team knows that and they know we're not going to throw, why are they not just basically in field goal block every play? Like, why are they not just doing that? And it's because they were doing that. They were. There was nobody back, right? And at one point I said to myself, I'm like, man, maybe if we just like threw the ball to this formation a couple times a game, we'd be way more successful because we didn't win games. Like we didn't win anything, right? And I just thought to myself, like, man, it's really hard when the defense knows, what you're doing. And now fast forward, 10 plus years, and I'm watching an NFL team do almost the same type of thing in terms of tipping their hand on what play's coming and what type of play. And it's just like, man, maybe football isn't as hard as people think it is sometimes. Like sometimes it's not that hard. It's just like there's certain things that seem very easy, right, Tommy? Like that's what I'm saying, basically.
Oh, for sure. And even look at like what Josh McDaniels dialed up there on the 4th and 1. Like everybody thought that was gonna be run. They fooled the Steelers.
Yeah.
You did the play action out of it, and you ended up getting a big touchdown to Devontae. Like I'm not saying that you have to outthink yourself or anything that way, but just disguise a little better, please, because like do some PA boots on some of those plays where it looks like a guaranteed run.
Absolutely.
Now I don't know what the max upside is if you've got Connor Hayward in Miles Boykin out there. Like if you do a pass out of that,
the thing with Boykin is like he can at least get down the field. He's a fast player.
He can. He's a long strider. Yeah.
Right.
So
like if you get him down the field,
you'll catch him off guard at the very least. Let's see what he's got. He hasn't been targeted in a while.
Forever.
So I mean, not very long. And so I would at least like a little bit more disguise there. Trick me, Canada. I mean, one time I want you to say, wow, that really threw me through a loop there. And so there were a few of those play actions last week. I'm like, all right, I like where this is heading.
I did like the one screen design to Warren as well. It won't like if you remember that play, like that was pretty solid. I'm like, that's something I haven't seen, so it's cool. Just don't see much of that though, man. It's just
personnel groupings. Just don't tip your hat. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, but again, like we'll take the win. This is a win that should have been a little bit more comfortable, but it was, oh, by the way, thank you, McDaniels, for kicking the field goal for some inexplicable reason, by the way.
I was bad math there. I think it's
I don't, again, as an NFL coach, like this is supposed to be the stuff that's not really hard. There's a lot of hard decisions you have to make as a coach, whether it comes to roster construction, who's starting, who's playing what snaps, all this stuff. Whether or not to kick a field goal or not, or go for a touchdown is got to be pretty low on the list of difficulty things to do as a head coach. And yet so many coaches are just in their head about it. Or I don't know what it is. It's even Baldwin, like last year, I remember all the field goal tries that he was trying when Boswell clearly wasn't right and like trying 50-yard field. I'm like, just go for it. Like, who cares? Like the offense is bad. Give us an extra chance, right? Maybe that's the key is just go for it on fourth down every time. I don't know. But again, it's just stuff like that really bothers me because I'm like,
it was too late in the game, Shayne, for them to think that they could, because the Steelers got one first down. It's over, and they ended up getting that. They had the nice play to Robinson there, and he just went down before he got to the sideline, and that's all she wrote. But very interesting call there. I don't know what the analytics would have said, but I bet you wasn't.
It was definitely 100% go for it in that situation. The other thing is, like, I knew it watching. I'm like, why are they kicking the field goal? If I know, we talk about a lot of time. If we know, right? And I'm not saying we don't know anything, obviously, but we don't know as much as they're supposed to know, clearly. But if I know that you're not supposed to kick a field goal there, you better know that you're not supposed to kick a field goal there statistically. If that's your decision, then fine. But like, I think he said something after the game of like, oh, well, I thought we couldn't. It would be a 2-possession game if we didn't get it. I'm like, no, it's an 8-point game. You've already gotten a 2-point conversion in this very game. Like, do you not remember that play? Were you not a part of that? Like, what? Just really weird stuff in Vegas. I feel bad for him a little bit because they literally can't even fire the coach because they don't have enough money to hire a new one if they fire him. They're still paying Gruden however much money.
Well, they can go right over to the casinos and try to gamble.
Maybe that's what they're going to start seeing, like Mark Davis show up to the casino with a bag of money like a movie villain, being like, I need to put it all on black, like just to get money to get him out of there. Like, it's insane what we're doing here. But no, I feel bad for them a little bit, but not too much. It's the Raiders. But overall, again, nice win for the team. Managed to get a win here. We'll see if we can pick up a win against the Texans. If we can go 3-1, start the year with how we've looked, I'll take it
Mhm.
because I'm hoping it only goes up
Yeah.
from here, right? The offenses can really
Oh,
go up.
yeah.
The defense should get better over the course of the year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll
And for
see.
what it's worth, I'm going to put out a little stat here, Shane.
Mhm.
Ben Roethlisberger never won on the road against the Raiders.
He didn't.
So that was the
1995 was
first
the
time.
last time that we. Yeah,
1995. Now
I wasn't
the
alive.
Steelers weren't. This came in Las Vegas instead of Oakland, but
Right.
first road win since 1995 against the Raiders.
Yeah, definitely like to see it. So, but that'll do it for us this week, folks. I'll catch you an episode of the Curtain Call every Tuesday. At about 5 is when you should expect to see it on the channel. And don't forget to tune in to the Still Curtain podcast. We're live every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Go for about an hour, depending on how talkative we get. It depends, Tommy. But definitely join us there. Join us in the live chat. Chat it up. Let us know how you're thinking about the game that just played. And also, we'll talk about the Texans game, of course. You can follow Tommy on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can see it on the screen here. You can follow me at Shayne Kubas as well. And we will see you guys next time.